Hello, Brontë-saurs and Eyre-Heads. Coming up on episode 18 of Sundays with Jane Eyre, The Spiteful Tearing of the Veil. We'll be talking about Volume 2, Chapter 10, or Chapter 25 of the novel, and our co-host will be Finola Austin, author of the novel Bronte's Mistress. Our story so far in under 3 minutes. Young Jane has survived an abusive childhood at the hands of the Reed family and the Lowood school where she was sent for being too rebellious. Her best friend at school, the saintly Helen Burns, dies at a very young age. When she turns 18, Jane is hired to be a governess at Thornfield to educate Mr. Rochester's ward, Adele. Jane is disappointed that Thornfield is not haunted, but she does hear a strange laugh coming from the attic. The housekeeper, Mrs. Fairfax, assures her it is just the servant Grace Poole. Jane meets Mr. Rochester. He falls off his horse. He is fascinated by her watercolor paintings, and they begin to have intimate conversations about their inner lives. One night, a mysterious fire breaks out in his bedroom. Jane rescues Rochester by dousing the fire and him with water. They then hold hands in his bedroom. The next day, Jane thinks Grace Poole has tried to murder him and can't understand why Rochester allows her to be at Thornfield. Friends of Rochester come to Thornfield for an extended holiday, including Blanche Ingram, whom everyone believes is going to marry Rochester. Jane continues her inner battle over her love for Rochester as she watches him interact with the insufferable Blanche. The mysterious Mr. Mason arrives from the West Indies, and an old Romany woman arrives to tell the ladies fortunes. Jane hears her fortunes, but it turns out it was just Rochester in disguise as the fortune teller. What? During the night, Jane is awakened by a cry from the attic, then someone calling for help. Rochester comes for Jane, brings her to the attic, and there she finds Mason lying bloody in his bed. Jane assumes that Grace Poole has tried to murder him. She helps Rochester attend to Mason. They get him out of the house before any of the others awake. Rochester and Jane sit in the garden and talk alone. Jane is summoned back to her childhood home, Gateshead, by her dying Aunt Reed, and learns that her aunt had withheld from Jane a letter from an uncle wishing to make her the heir to his fortune, and Mrs. Reed told him that Jane was dead. Jane returns to Thornfield, and she and Rochester finally reveal their love for each other in the orchard at night. Jane utters the famous line, "I am no bird and no net ensnares me," and there is kissing. Yes, this is a kissing book. Kissing in the rain, too. Rochester proposes to Jane, or Jane proposes to Rochester. In any case, they agree to marry. But later that night, there's a terrific storm, and lightning destroys the great horse chestnut tree in the orchard. Rochester takes Jane shopping in what would be the worst rom-com shopping montage ever. He tells a fairy story to Adele. He sings a song while he and Jane finally have an out-in-the-open courtship. In Volume 2, Chapter 10, a couple nights before the wedding, Jane has a nightmare and wakes to find a strange and scary woman in her bedroom whom Jane likens to a vampire. You don't want to miss the next exciting episode of Sundays with Jane Eyre from the Rosenbach.